welcome, Mike. Thanks for coming over.
Thanks for having me.
So when I had the idea to do a local podcast, you were one of the very first people that I wanted to have as a guest because your business is so cool and you're so congenial.
Oh, thank you. Flattered and honored.
I really felt like it would be a good conversation. I've never told anyone about your product that they weren't immediately interested.
Oh, thank you.
So I think you and I met, I don't know how many years ago. Three, really? I had a guitar at Guitar Center, and I really don't even remember why I brought it in to work on it. But you worked on it for me, and I think you and I probably talked for a couple hours at the time.
Yeah. It was one of your PRS.
Yeah. And in the context of that discussion, you were telling me about this business that you were trying to launch. Mm-hmm. And so I studied economics in college, and I have a full appreciation for anybody that decides to be an entrepreneur, especially someone who's an entrepreneur who makes art as their product.
It definitely takes a special individual with a very special set of committed ideas, ideals, and beliefs.
Yeah.
Because of the risk that it is.
Right.
Which is awesome.
There's financial risk, but there are a lot of psychological battles that a person has to fight through. And so just by you telling me I'm trying to bring this product to market, here's my vision for what it is, and you showing me examples of it, I just thought, it's cool that guy's here in Lexington. That's somebody that I want to have a relationship with. That's somebody that I want to support.
Thank you.
And we just kind of bonded talking music, right?
Yep.
So tell me, and everyone at home, about your idea for the Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company, and when that happened.
Okay. It actually happened about 5 years ago, and I'm 56 now. So in my early 30s, I lived out in the country, had a barn, and decided I wanted to start building musical instruments, guitars and basses, for myself. And the idea, it was kind of a loosely structured idea, was that I wanted them to meet certain criteria. I'm going to list them, not necessarily in order of this one matters more, but this was kind of my generic thinking of what would this look like. And the thing that hit me right early on was they had to be beautiful pieces of art, and then as beautiful pieces of art, where would I find them? Well, they're not going to be in most music stores. They're going to be in art galleries or special exhibits, and then if I could find them, they'd probably be out of my reach financially. And I wasn't predestining myself to being a pauper. No. It's just in our society, and I mean just around the world, if something with an expensive price tag is automatically deemed valuable. Okay, it's perception. Perception is reality for most people. So with that thinking, that was motivation for me to really, whatever comes from my hands, whatever I'm going to build, that's the pedestal. That was what I was going to shoot for. Okay. They'd be few and far between. They'd be one of a kind. They'd be treasured. They'd be prized. They'd be highly desired. And years from now, that would even be more of an increase. I'll be gone, So that thinking was my standard for instruments that I built for myself and for a few of my friends. Move that forward 20 years. 5 years ago, we had a really heavy winter. And I remember specifically from like Christmas to into February, there was like 3 snows that were 18 to 20 inches a piece, And so, shoveled a lot of snow. And I remember I came in one afternoon and sat down and actually poured up a glass of bourbon and was just sitting in a chair chilling, relaxing, chilling, but also I wanted to physically warm up, And I had an acoustic guitar propped over in the corner on a stand, and I remember kind of like looking through your glass right there. It was in my line of sight. And I held the thing up. I thought, man, that's a pretty color.
Yeah.
On a guitar. And then I just, out of the blue, it hit me. It's like, I wonder if anyone had ever built an electric guitar from a bourbon barrel. Okay, so I sat on it for about a year and just researched it and looked and realized that best I could find the answer was no. And I found a couple instances where people had used parts of them in some type of construction, and those were just on basically the body, the top or maybe the back. So I thought, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And the whole premise was the instrument had to come, all the wood in it had to come completely from a used barrel. Okay. They're Eastern white oak. They come from basically, I think, Missouri and Arkansas is where most of the wood is grown and harvested that the cooperages, build the barrels from. So it wasn't going to be go to the wood place where you can buy planks of wood and buy Eastern white oak and build a guitar. No. The whole mystique is they have to come from barrels. Okay. Well, that's a pretty cool thing because bourbon, is huge, not just as something you drink around here, but it's a cultural phenomenon that is increasing exponentially worldwide, which I think is fabulous, and for so many reasons. But the wood had to come from a used barrel. Okay, well, right there from a woodworking standpoint, the odds are completely stacked against you. Okay, because the wood has been intentionally exposed to the elements, abused almost, if you want to think of it from a woodworking standpoint. It's sat out in sub-zero temperatures at times. It's over 100 degrees at times. In the central Kentucky, we've got 4 pretty distinct seasons.
Where were we?
We were talking about where'd I come up with the idea to build a guitar out of a bourbon barrel.
Okay.
So as I said, we had a pretty strong winter. I shoveled some snow and had the idea, wondered if anyone ever built one. And my research showed me no. So, okay, figure this out. And it's been about a year just every once in a while thinking about it, and finally came up with, when I looked at what are the parts of an electric guitar, there's no pieces. Well, when you look at how a guitar is built, those pieces don't really exist in a barrel. in the pieces that are in the barrel to start with,
Definitely not.
And so I think, okay, since my whole thing is it's got to come from just barrel wood, that means I got 2 types of wood for the options. Well, not 2 types, but two shapes, two whatever, staves and head pieces.
Right.
The staves they're curved in 3 different radii. Okay, they're machined that way out of a rectangular piece of wood. They're not steamed and bent and pressed. So they're reasonably stable because they're actually cut in 3 different planes to do that. The tops are flat pieces that are joined, and then about a 22-inch circle or diameter. Okay, how can I get what I want to do? And my initial thinking was I was going to use the staves to create the body. And then when I looked at them, the curves are just way too tight. It just was not going to work. And so with the different radii, all right, so I had to rethink that. But then the main challenge in my head at that point was, how do I get a neck? And again, when you look at barrels, it kind of looks like the staves, some of the wider side pieces might work, but they're not going to because of the curvature in them. So I decided, all right, let's look at this differently. And some guitars are made necks, or they're 2-piece necks made with a scarf joint, which is a woodworking thing. You cut at an angle, and it's used to take 2 smaller pieces of wood to give you a longer piece with an angle in it. Okay, and it's actually a commonly used technique in guitar neck building when conservation matters. Okay, there's less waste that way. A glue joint itself is actually stronger than the surrounding grain. So the way I looked at it, and so then my only options there to have flat pieces of wood were going to be out of the head, barrel head, okay? The center pieces of the head. All right, so I looked at that and did some measurements and made some cuts and experimented a little bit and came up with what I was satisfied with as what was going to be a neck blank that I could actually carve a neck out of with an angle in it. and the angle has varied. I started a little 13 or 14 degrees. I've moved it to 11 degrees. 11 is enough, the headstock pitch back, but also that plays a role in actually fitting in a case. Okay, that extra 2 or 3 degrees sometimes pitches it too far back, and it's a hard thing when if you look at it from the side. You need a thicker, deeper box to put something in that's more of an angle. All right, so settled on 11 degrees. Settled with the neck blank, and then the last piece of it was I wanted aesthetically and artistically the fretboard had to be a single piece of wood. Once again, the very center piece of these heads is actually long enough for an electric guitar, not for a bass, but for an electric guitar. I can get a fretboard out of a single piece, even up to a 24 fret neck. All right. So I thought, okay, I can make the neck out of the pieces that I have out of the barrel head. All right, that on requirements, check. That's a possibility. How do I make the body? And then I just looked at it, and when I looked at it, I thought, okay, my first idea wasn't going to work because of the geometry of what's there. So I actually tried cutting staves down. Take a 32-inch stave, whatever, however long they are, and cut the ends off on a wider board. Now I have a less of a radius curve when you look at it from the side. Okay. Well, then when I tried to level and straighten to get a true rectangle, it shaved it down to nothing. It just was not possible, again, with the measurements of the 3 different radii and how this thing is machined. So, okay, that's not going to work. And so then I just looked at it and thought, guitars have tops, they got backs, they got sidewalls. A barrel has a top, it's got a bottom, head and head, and it's got sidewalls, which are the staves. Okay, so what I need to do is squish the barrel and shape it like a guitar body. So that was my thinking. Okay, and that's what I did. So then when I made the first one, it took me 2 months of just trying this and that. And that actually was out of Buffalo Trace head. And I own the instrument. Buffalo Trace has been really cool. It's actually on display at their distillery. I'm real proud of that, So once I got that concept figured out, it's like, okay, now what do I do? And so oak is a very dense, heavy wood. These feel like they're solid bodies, but they're not. They're semi-hollows. Okay. And so I started the first one actually 4 years and a month ago. Got the first one finished. It'll be 4 years in June. That's the Buffalo Trace one. And in that time, I worked a job doing guitar repair at a local place, part-time, and have been doing my Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company on a part-time basis. Just realistically, how can I get this thing off the ground? I'm not going to rush. I'm not going to mass produce these. They are completely handmade. The amount of time it takes to get one piece to line up with the next is damn near insane when you talk to most people or think about it. It's a crazy amount of patience. There's a lot of glue faces that have to dry. It's apparent when you really look at it. It's not apparent when you first look at it. So the actual production piece of time of how long it takes to do these, keeping track. I've gone through some different performers, kept records. They take anywhere from 50 to 100. My hands on, I'm cutting, doing something time with them.
5,200 hours?
Hours, yeah.
Wow,
okay.
To
produce. That's not a 5 days a week, 10-hour, I start Monday, it's done Friday.
Right.
It just doesn't happen that way. You got to make the cuts. You got to let the wood, depending on the age of the wood, how young or how dry or how wet is it. And that's pretty much the heads. It's got to be dry enough to use to where it's going to behave. That can happen, I won't say quickly. You can kiln dry them on a fresh head, but the best thing is, the rule of thumb, if I recall correctly, for letting wood dry to use is 1 inch per year. All right, these heads are almost 1 inch thick. Really, you break a barrel open, you want to just let the head sit for a year in heat and whatever, just air dry. So then there's 2 styles of heads. And so my thinking, I'm kind of jumping around, but I was fascinated with the what's on the barrel heads themselves. And I was thinking when I went to a liquor store and I saw this pretty cool label, that's what was on the heads of the barrels. Most of the time, hardly at all. Very few distilleries actually have a lot of label and ink and color on the actual barrel heads themselves.
Unnecessary expense for them.
Well, it could be. Every step in production of manufacturing obviously takes time, which means it costs money in some capacity. So it becomes a value assessment thing, whatever. Most of the time, most people don't ever see the barrels that are in the barrel house.
Right.
And they think pretty much barrel's a barrel. Okay, I understand that. Artistically, I wanted, when you look at these, I wanted the tops, I want them to look like these were in the barrel house with the barrels the whole time the barrel was in the barrel house aging. Okay.
What's fun about it is you have to age the bourbon in the oak barrels, and then you have to age the wood after it's a barrel for it to be a bourbon barrel guitar.
Yeah. It really is, man. And so I wanted them to look like the barrels. I wanted them to feel like the barrels. You won't get splinters, but a lot of times once the barrels have been in the warehouse, the wood moves, the wood cups. They're not table smooth like this. You can feel seams. It is what it is, and so I wanted to engage all the senses in what these are. So sight, sound, scent, smell, touch, taste, and yeah, they're all engaged, from the building of it to when it's finished to the playing of it, all the senses really are still engaged, even taste. Okay, we'll get to that. But it just was really a neat thing. Okay, so I built the first one, and then I had a bunch of different ideas about, well, what if I do this, and what can I do that, and what type of finishes. And a huge factor in how this came about was what I had in my shop and what I didn't and still don't have in my shop. Okay, and my life was going through a transition, and it's like, okay, I got to make some decisions about some different things. I'm in a place that doesn't have air conditioning. I do have a heater in the wintertime, but basically my shop environmentally is kind of equivalent to what the barrels have to put up with year round. They're in buildings that are not air conditioned. They're not heated. Depending on where they are topographically and geographically, there's going to be temperature and environmental, exchanges seasonally. But some of these barrel houses, they get really hot in the summertime, especially the higher up, and a lot of them stay kind of cool lower to the ground year round, So anyway, that thinking, my shop 9 months out of the year is uncomfortable as being polite. My shop is not conducive for building conventional guitars and trusting that all the wood's going to behave like it's supposed to, But that's fine, because I kind of joked with it. It wasn't a limitation of what I didn't have. It was part of the equation of what I did have to contribute to what is it that I'm able to produce with what I have to work with, not with what am I restricted by, And so I'm fine with that. And then another piece of this was going back to 25 plus years ago when I started building the first instruments that were neck through, that were designer pieces that I still have, 5 or 6 of them, and I built some for my friends. Thinking about, and I painted for a couple years in a guitar shop. I loved it. I was good at it. I still know I'm good at it. I still love it. I'm just not set up for it. Okay. That point may come again in my life at some point as part of a service I offer through either Bourbon Barrel or some other projects I'm working on. But realizing I'm not set up environmentally to do full sprays of nitro and, stuff that people really love. The space that it takes to commit to doing that, because you can't just spray it today and ship it out tomorrow. I guess it's possible. It just doesn't always work out great for the guitar, So it's like, okay, it's a limitation. Well, it's a non-issue. It's just not part of the equation. And the other thing that was huge on a spiritual, emotional, personal gut level was I'm a unique individual just like you are. Okay, I'm building one-of-a-kind pieces of art that are instruments. I don't want to try to compete with everybody else doing what they're doing. And anybody that has the guitar stickles to go out on their own or partner up with somebody and actually bring a vision to life is awesome. I totally applaud whoever those people are, wherever they are. It's not about what the design specifically. It's the fact that they've taken the step to go out on that limb, And so, but that helped me even further laser define and focus the limb I'm going to go out on. No one else is on it. I don't have the financial capacity to compete in the arena that everyone else is competing in. I'm not looking to be a major unit producer. That's not who I am. That's not what my art is. That's not what my instruments are. They're unique individuals. They all have a soul and a spirit. They all have names. Most of them are female. I just like that as a guy, And I try to name them related or appropriate to the distillery they came from, or if that can't be identified, what else is there about that head or that top that justifies the name? And I got some examples I can, I'll explain those later for you. But back to the construction of it. And so when I started building them and I realized, okay, I understand what this is. I looked at, there's over the last 50 years, 60 years, there's been two major guitar manufacturers of electric guitars, and a third one came along 30-ish years ago. Okay. So, everybody knows about the work Leo Fender did with Fender and the ground he broke, his models. The same thing with Gibson. Ted McCarty was probably the one in the late 50s and 60s who's credited with all the stuff that makes Gibson the wow factor, whether you're a player or not. You want to give credit to him, and Les Paul, So there's that. There's the Gibson style of instrument. There's the Fender style of instrument. They look different. They sound different. The construction's different. And then 30-ish years ago, Paul Reed Smith came along with great ideas and one heck of an artistic vision. And so now I'm 56 years old. So I've watched that happen since I was in school, which is really cool to see as a person, as a guitarist, as a luthier, as a art appreciator, and just that there were two major competitors, and they've been bought and sold, corporate business type stuff. And then here's this other person that had the vision and, still is executing his vision. And so I had the privilege of meeting him 3-4 years ago, I guess. And he came to Lexington, and I brought a guitar, heard his presentation, and then afterwards, thanked him for just everything that he's done that I'm aware of, and just the ground he's broken. And I asked him, I said, because I'm not presumptuous. I said, I built a guitar almost 20 years ago. I looked at your design. It inspired me. It is not a copy of your design, but I'd like you to just get your hands on it and just genuinely offer me your opinion. Okay. And I don't know. I mean, some people in his position, he could have refused. Here's this magnet of guitar production and art known around the world. His initials that are on his birth certificate are what people know. PRS, Paul Reed Smith. His parents did him justice. He goes, sure. I said, well, it's down in my car. So I went and got it and just put it in his hands, and he played it. He goes, wow, this thing is loud. And he said,
meaning resonant.
Resonant, yeah, not plugged in, just
right.
Playing it acoustically. And I said, there's a ton of things that didn't come out like I wanted. I said, but this was just a prototype experiment, for me 20-something years ago. And he played it. He said, the neck feels amazing. I said, okay, thank you. And so he was real nice, and so that was that. But that was very affirming to me that here I was, just one guy here in Lexington, just had this idea and just wanted to do something for himself, and was willing to have someone of his fame and his stature, his importance, whatever set of words you want to put on it, to actually get hands on it, but then to be honest, and he was, and what he said was very affirming to me. just as one person, as a builder, an instrument I built for myself, you know. And what he liked about it, he recognized what he recognized he liked about it was intentional on my part, that I built that way intentionally for myself. And that's all I need to say, you know. That was really cool. That was really cool. And so artistically, I started then thinking, well, what other finishes, if you will, what other top options, what other construction type options that you see and touch, what are actually there? Well, you look at a barrel, there's the stamped outer head, there's the non-stamped other outer head, which is generally the bottom or the, you know, the lower end, whatever. But when they rack them, they're horizontal. So there's not a top or a bottom. There's an east or a west, basically. So they're laying horizontal. One end is stamped, one end is not. That's just the way it is. Okay. So then I got to thinking, well, if you turn the head over, it's charcoal. All right. You scrape the charcoal away, and there's black burned underneath the charcoal, but you get down to the wood that still has some density that's not just scraping away or pushing your finger in. Okay, so that's a finish. So then I got a friend who said, I want you to build me one. What do you want? He goes, well, I'm not quite sure. All right. So the second guitar I built started out was going to be scrape the charcoal away, and it's a black top. Also wanted the colors and the textures and the materials to, as accurately and as reproducibly possible, that are used in the distilling of bourbon or in the barrel. The whole thing, everything on everything that I've built, I can look at and explain to you and tie it right back to the bourbon production or the industry. And that's intentional, okay? With the exception of some of the parts that, and even with those, even the metal that's used or the finishes probably are in some of the tooling that's, you know, in the stills or whatever. But I want them just to, all five senses engaged, speak bourbon, smell bourbon, taste bourbon, touch bourbon, hear bourbon, you know. So then I started working on it, and he goes, well, the black's cool, but what if we take it a little further? And he's a bourbon aficionado. He's an educator. His work is very well known throughout the world. It's my friend Doug Boyd with UK. He's director of oral history, you know, at the Nunn Center, and guitar player, you know. And we've been friends. We used to live in the same neighborhood. His wife Jenny's awesome. His girls are his girls are great. His dog's awesome. Just a true heart connection, you know, for how many years now. And he goes, well, let's go through and get rid of the black and see what's underneath it. So because the boards were cupped. I didn't bring his guitar. I brought one that, you know, I can show you kind of parts of what looks like it. But because the boards are cupped and you run them through a planer, it's a straight blade, the higher spots on either side of the board are going to be removed, and they're going to be a different color because of the combination of how it was burned, the red line of the bourbon moving in and out of the wood seasonally, okay? You're going to get a variation of like a dark brown, a rusty brown, to a creamy beige looking color. So we started playing it down, and it's like, he goes, oh my gosh, that is beautiful. And so what we ended up with on his front and back are actually the inside, the underneath sides of the heads that are planed down through the burned area into the red line. Okay. So like this one on the end here, this is Derby. That's an example of what we did with Doug's. That one, we didn't go as far, but you can see the stripes coming up and down are a lighter color. That's where more wood has been removed. Okay, again, because the boards were cupped. His, we took a little further, and there's more of the blonde and lighter color, but there's just beautiful variation of caramel to dark chocolate in coloring, you know. So that was that's another finish. So I got the stamp top, the no stamp, I got the charred, the black, and I got I call it the bourbon burst. And because he and I are good friends, I dubbed it to, you know, people on the inside, it's called a Boyd burst. All right, so down the road 30 years from now, we're all sitting at a bar having a drink or whatever, and if the topic of what's a Boyd burst? Well, some people may know it, and most people won't, you know. And maybe by then I'll have my coffee table books and pictures and all that stuff. But so that was 4 different finishes. And then I thought, okay, what's some other ones I can do? And over, the last couple of years, I've built a couple guitars that have been donated to some charities. And one of them did an Angel's Envy guitar. Wes Henderson over there was really, really nice about participating and, providing the head. And these were for Kids Cancer Alliance the last 2 years. That one brought $5,500. And then last year, the Beam Brands were the kind of the sponsor. And that one ended up, I used gold, silver, and copper leaf on each of the guitars. Each of the 2 years, the designs on them reflected the number of children that had participated in the camp and the number of kids that had died, since that participation. And so I've got a lot of pictures of those two builds. Some of them are on my website. I'm in the midst of, but I'm slowly getting to actually redoing the photo gallery, because what I want is eventually each guitar to have its own story page that I've built. And I've got a ton of production pictures of each guitar over the past 4 years. I built 25, 26. But that was really cool, just so how am I going to do these different designs? But as I'm, going through figuring out different possibilities, to offer, customers. So then I came up with the whole burst concept. Okay. Well, it's a lighter color and a darker color on the outside. So, that's pretty cool. That's another one. And so I'm able to achieve that, by special, it's really top secret, but it's not. It's a torch. Just stay out of the way. And so, burn the edges. And then was working on the one that was going to be covered with some of the leaf. And I put boards together from heads that really didn't match it, that I wasn't going to count on having to see what the actual top of it was, because it was going to be covered with the leaf. So as I was sanding and planing down, I came up with this really crazy cool finish of a top that had been weathered. And yet, as I'm planing it, I'm starting to lose some of the edge stuff. Well, then I took the torch and torched the edges again, because when I was going to finish the manufacturing and the wood was going to be exposed, I wanted to see the dark edge. And then there's this faded, so then I'm starting to sand off to smooth down. And as I'm removing wood with sandpaper, I now have this burst, which is darker edges, but everything's now lighter and faded looking, like it was starting to get bleached out. Well, that's like a faded burst. That's really cool. And then I built one that's for sale. Her name's Ginger, and she has a unique option of how she's plumbed, literally. And I set it up to where it could actually be hooked into a still and be part of the distillation process. You can access both sides of the waste. There's fittings. There's a copper pipe that goes through. And with her, I wanted to use copper leaf. So it came out awesome. And then a couple years ago, I started, when I first was doing these, the inlay dots on the fingerboard are hand-rolled clay. So think about when you're in first, second, third grade, wherever you got the Play-Doh and you're rolling out the worms and making spaghetti noodles, So roll out different colors, put them together, kept playing with that. Stuff them in a tube, cook them, come out and cut them. And with magnifying glass, it's like, oh my gosh, the design that's in there, So 2 years ago, I had a gentleman say to me, for people that don't understand what a guitar really looks like, he goes, what do you make them look artistically, make them stand out on the wall. Okay, so then that got me thinking, I need to do stuff with the fretboard a little bit differently. Okay, so then I was thinking, okay, fretboard has inlays, some of them are in the middle, some of them are all over. And what came to me was, what type of inlay am I going to do? I'm going to take phrases that are part of the bourbon industry that are relative, that most people, if they pick up a bottle or they see an advertisement, they're going to either see Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, those 4 words. They might see bottled in bond, which means as a government standard, it's exactly 50% alcohol. It's 100 proof. And so then there's another. So I've built a couple with that, and I've experimented with some coloring and some inlay techniques. So I've got those 2 phrases. There's another one that I'm going to do, I haven't done yet, and bourbon is known as America's native spirit. So the fretboard inlay is going to be America's native spirit. And then I think taking that one a little further, okay, Jefferson's, they got a pretty cool relationship with the people over there, and their advertising phrase is ridiculously small batch bourbon. It's actually on their barrel heads that are in the warehouse. So I was able to get some heads and lay it out, and I've got one here. Her name's Jennifer. Let's see. Yeah, she's down here on the end. But ridiculously small batch runs across this way, okay? So then I took that and had the fretboard lasered with that phrase and did the inlay. And so I've got a gentleman on the West Coast he's buying this one. I'm going to build the next one, and I'm going to change the inlay color. And so as I've experimented with these to try to have them be authentic to the copper and the aged tarnished copper, unless you're right up on it, it doesn't just pop out.
Not enough contrast.
Not enough contrast. When you're up on it, it's like, damn.
Right. Yeah.
And so the next round of what I'm going to be doing over the next year or two is there's going to be more contrast on some of the fretboard inlays. When I first started, what am I going to name them? What am I going to call them? What's the logo going to look like? What's easy to remember? Why would it be easy to remember? And I thought about it, and my last name is Mankel, Mankel. It's a German name. There's 6 letters. You can play around with lettering and fonts, come up with something. But on a headstock, Gibson is 6 letters. You look at the layout, Fender is 6 letters. What's the real estate look like with what you got to work with and all that? So I thought, it's not important that my name's on it, blatantly for someone to look and see. What is important is, does my logo tell the story of what it is, and is it easy to see? And, Doug and I were talking about, because I kind of pretty much had the first one in process, and we're in his garage one day working on a little, helping him with shelving or something, and I still have the napkin, and we just wrote out. And initially, what are we going to call it? What's it going to be? And I already decided my name is Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company. The reason I did that was when I created the website, or Doug helped me with that. And this is total truth. If it doesn't matter where you lived, where you're from, what language you spoke, whether you were sober, whether you were drunk off your butt, whether you were tripping on acid, 3 bags into the bong, whatever it was, if you're trying to talk about it and you're incapacitated, what would you say for someone to actually do an internet search? The 3 words that would come out of your mouth would be bourbon, barrel, guitar. You punch those 3 in and it comes right up. All right. And so it's a funny story to actually tell, but it's the absolute truth, And then so, because I've got Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company, if I had my own bourbon, what would be on the barrel, stamped on the end, And that's what it would be. So it's like, okay. So now we laid it out, and then started looking at how much room do I have on the headstock, and what's a headstock shape going to be. My initial guitar I built has a different shaped headstock, which I use. It's kind of a narrow taper, which I'd use on other builds that I've done for myself. And none of them are exactly the same, but they all kind of have the same type of wider shoulders, narrower kind of neck with a point that's offset. Okay. I just like the way it looked artistically. And so as I'm looking in my shop, I've got some empty bottles. Okay. And so I can drink on the job if I want to. I say that tongue in cheek because I can. But it also, if I want to do that and I do it, it's inspiring. Sometimes like, I'm going to take a shot here and what's coming next, and it's not just about taking a drink of bourbon. I don't get a buzz. I have, and if I want to, I will, but it's the whole creative process of the inspiration of, then when I glue, I put bourbon in with the glue. All right. Sometimes I pour it in, rub it in. Sometimes I take a shot and spit it in it. All right. But it's there. So then on a deeper artistic level, my DNA is in each one, not just blood or fingernail scrapings, and there's always blood in one of them. And every guitar has blood in it. Okay. It's just the way it happens. So my DNA is in each one. I've got saliva and the bourbon. So getting back to the headstock shape, and what I figured out was looking at the size and the scale and the proportion of what a headstock normally is relative to scale length and body measurements. The paddle headstock type shape with an angled back. So there's basically two kinds. There's the ones that angle back, and there's the ones that come straight off. So the Fender style, they basically take a 1-inch thick board, and the neck is machined out of it, and the headstock is level with the fretboard. It's just at a lower level.
Right.
Okay, so then the string angle, the break, whatever, you accomplish that by putting string trees and changing angle, string coming down. The other way to accomplish string angle is to pitch the headstock back an equivalent amount. So looking at guitars that have the headstocks pitched back, the Gibson style design, the Paul Reed Smith design, a lot of the jazz boxes over many years, okay, pitch back size, I landed on a generic shape of an upside down bottle. Okay. They're all a little bit different size. I've got a basic template I draw it out on, but then by the time I cut it on the bandsaw, do some sanding, if I got to glue some wings on, they never come out exactly the same, which is fine. These are all handmade things. You know, I'm not using a CNC to crank these puppies out. And so I'm fine with that. So then I thought, okay, the orientation of my logo. And I initially was thinking a little thing like the size of a quarter. Okay. Well, you can't see it. And I was going to put it up at the very end where most of these designs are. So, no, wait a minute. I'm putting the time in to build this thing. I want it to be seen and recognized. I'm going to make this thing as big as it can be. And so that's what I did. So from across a room, even though I have readers on these, I can still read that says Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company. Okay. So the first ones I was doing were like, this is Angie. This is Susan. The headstock I left exactly natural color, had the logo lasered with just Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company on it. And then I started having the year put in it. In a little box underneath. And then a couple of years ago, a young man came up to me and he said, "Why is your name not on it?" I said, "Well, because that's not the primary reason I'm doing it." He says, "No, your name needs to be on it." And so I'll autograph the back of a headstock that's my signature, okay? And sometimes inside the control cavity. Well, then I looked at my logo and there's space above Bourbon. I played around with it. So here's my signature. So it evolved into just the name of the company, then the name of the company with the date, and then that with my signature lasered into it. And so I also then wanted to, from the front and the back, whenever anybody looked at them, you could tell what year they were by, obviously you see the year in the headstock logo, but then I do the same smaller logo on the back between the ferrules where the screws are to hold the neck on. So from the back side, it's dated. Okay. Smaller, but it's still there. I thought that was a pretty cool touch. Well, then as all this is unfolding and evolving, and I decided I need greater visual contrast from an artistic standpoint, and how do I even make my logo stand out further? Well, a lot of guitars have black headstock faces. Okay, so black's in charcoal. It works. It's part of the whole Bourbon thing. You know, I can legitimately draw the connection. Okay, fine. So then I decided I'll spray the face of the headstock black and then scrape away or mask off whatever to where my logo in the natural color of the wood that's in the oak shines through. And so sometimes they're light, sometimes they're dark, sometimes they're burnt. It's whatever is actually in there.
What the guitar itself calls for.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why the headstocks look like they do. That's why you can look over the evolution and see changes. They're all intentional. I'm satisfied with that, and they're continuing to evolve. It's going to basically stay the same shape. It's going to get a little narrower just so I can reduce the amount of the angle of the string coming off of the nut. Obviously, in guitar design, if you can get a straight string pull, that's generally deemed the greatest from tuning stability. This type of design, it's not there, which is fine.
Well, to be fair, neither is a Gibson.
No, they're not. They're not. And it's just you either choose to design it that way or you choose not to. For me, the aesthetics have to work, and so I'm completely satisfied with what I've come up with. The other thing about the headstock design being an upside down bottle, proportionally and scale wise, the actual neck at the nut for the first 2 or 3 frets looks like a bottle neck.
Right.
Okay, so if you were to pick a bottle and hold it upside down against all these, you're going to see, oh yeah, it looks right.
Right.
You know,
with the taper.
Yeah, yeah. So then that got me thinking. I mean, you know me well enough that there's different layers at different times, and some are kind of fast and some are kind of slow. But okay, so I got a upside down bottle shaped headstock with a neck on it. You're holding the neck. The bottle's upside down. If you hold a bottle upside down, what's inside it comes out, spills out, is released. Apply that to the guitar. When you're holding the guitar and you're playing it, the headstock's upside down. You're holding the neck. The spirit, America's native spirit, the spirit of the player comes down through the neck. The spirit of the player comes with how he or she is playing, with what's coming out of the guitar. It's all this on a lot of layers is all there, you know. So I feel good about that from a creative standpoint of being able to explain 1, 3, 4 different meanings of what just looking at that actually is. It's a good story, you know, and people can resonate with that, you know, when the spirit of the person comes out in what they're hearing, what they're playing, how they're playing, and when people can discern that and really recognize that, most artists, most people that play that I've ever had a conversation with, if I can have say something to them that acknowledges something I heard in what they did as man, that was cool. Here's what I thought I heard, here's what I noticed. It's always positive, you know. So that's kind of how all this unfolded as far as artistically, why they look like they do. I chose the classic shape of a Les Paul body style, like the old Juniors. I wanted one pickup, one volume control, and a wraparound bridge tailpiece for most of them. That was my initial thinking period. And I wanted that because I want to show as much of the head as possible. So like if you look at this one, this is a Pierce Lyons Reserve that it's really dirty, which is awesome. But what they did is they would take their barrels and take white paint to cover the labels that were on the end of them and then spray everything in black, which is a great contrast. They have a ton of information, and it's in letters you can see. It's not these little stamped roller things, okay? So those are my favorite ones to actually get my hands on to build because of the story they tell, you know? And of the 25 that I've built, 4 of them have been Alltech Pierce Lyons Reserve heads. And Dr. Lyons passed away a little over a year ago, you know. But I got to meet him a couple years ago, and it was a wonderful, you know, visit. He was very supportive, very encouraging. His son Mark is a guitar player. So there's some really neat things we talked about that I'm going to continue to believe are going to come to fruition.
And they've purchased guitars from you.
They actually own the one that's at their visitor center downtown. They actually had me build one for their facility in Ireland. And that one I changed up a little bit. And because it was in Ireland, the fretboard inlays, I made green, white, and orange clay, which is called the Irish flag, you know. And I had that finished. So when I got to meet with him, it was really nice to put that in his hands because at that time they were almost finished with the St. James Gate facility. And just the way timing and everything worked out was just what a wonderful privilege to be able to experience from an amazing man, you know. And so I actually have one of theirs, a lady in England bought. So there's one that lives in England. She's an artist over there, Lissy Taylor, and great girl, great family. And so Alltech owns 2. This is mine. All of them are named Michelle, all the Alltech ones. And the reason is they are, Alltech was very generous and very kind 2.5 years, well, it'll be 3 years ago this summer, to come out and film. It took 6 weeks, you know, 1 day a week, the actual construction process of the guitar that they own. That's, you know, it's on display in the visitor center, locked in a glass cabinet between nice bottles of all their offerings, you know, downtown in Lexington. So Michelle Michael Friedel was the lady that's their videographer. She won numerous awards internationally, you know, in Europe as well as here in America. An amazing woman, just ridiculously talented. And she also plays guitar, So it was really cool to just get to know her and subsequently her husband and her family, and just great people. But Alltech was very supportive and very encouraging, and Michelle took her 30 hours of film time and condensed it down to slightly under 8 minutes of a little small documentary, and I'm very proud of that work. That is. I don't watch it on a regular basis, but every time I watch it, I'm blown away and amazed at what I'm seeing, the quality of the cinematography, what the story actually is, the story that's being told by the person telling it. And oh, by the way, that's me. I don't look at it as I'm watching myself. I'm looking at it as I'm seeing something that's like, wow, this is just so amazing. And each time I see it, obviously, I feel pride as the builder and the creator, but I'm left with, even if I didn't know that was me and I watched it for the first time, I would want to get my hands on those guitars. I would want to meet the guy that built them, and I'd want to hang out for a while to see how all this goes, because to me, it's still amazing. So I'm just very thankful for the opportunities that I have, and it's just going to be so neat to see what unfolds,
Where can people find that video?
It's on YouTube, and I think it's called Guitar Slinger Combines Bourbon and Blues. If you just do a Google search or YouTube search for Bourbon Barrel Guitar Company, it'll come up. It's also on my website. I think it's under a news thing there. And again, I'm not proud to say I'm behind on keeping that up to date, but my company is me and my two hands, and I have moral support from great people like you and Tatiana, who helps me with a lot of the PR stuff. And she's just been great with encouraging, believing in what it is and the uniqueness of it.
So you've spoken to a lot. It's clear you're committed to a particular aesthetic philosophy, and every element of the production process being true to the components and the story of each instrument from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision-making involved in designing and producing these guitars from a tone and playing and feel standpoint?
Oh, yeah, man.
Because you are a guitar player.
I am a guitar player for almost 45 years now. Yeah, I was 12 when I started playing, and started working on my own stuff about the same time, tinkering with them. I'd say if the right type of pride, I'm very, very picky about damn near everything in my life, especially these. And so I wanted them to not only look good, not only sound good, I wanted them to feel good and play good. Okay. When I carve the necks, I do not use a template. None of the necks are exactly the same profile. And the reason I don't is because depending on the actual thickness of the boards, how they come out, and the grain. And a very pleasant surprise in building was all the pieces of a barrel are actually quarter sawn. So the rays, or the harder, dense pieces within the wood, go north and south. Okay. That helps with stability if you think in construction like an I-beam. Okay. That being said, because they're all different, I just start my carve. I start my rasp, and the wood tells me when to stop. Okay. So before I get to that point, I route for, I use an extra heavy duty truss rod. It's by Stuart McDonald. It's called the Hot Rod. It's actually 2 rods. It's not one. There's more control over the movement of the rod. Okay. And that, again, that's intentional. I think from an engineering standpoint, that's a great design. And then I step it up even further with, I use graphite reinforcement rods. And there's no trade secrets here. This is, you watch the video, you see all this,
right.
But it's all intentional. Okay. Call it overkill, call it belt and suspenders. It's still all intentional. And having worked on guitars for so many, many years, seeing guitars that have a single truss rod, whether it's an acoustic, an electric, or a bass, generally the necks are just not as stable. Okay. And they're not as stable because it's an organic piece of something. It's not carbon fiber. It's not steel. And wood does respond to temperature and humidity. Okay.
Especially this stuff.
Yeah. And so I had the idea of, I want to make these things as functionally stable as possible, again, with the parameters of what I actually have to work with. So I had a pretty cool thing unfold 3 years ago. I was in Nashville for the Summer NAMM and did a radio interview, and a young man came up to me and said, my mom's a photographer. She'd be happy to work with you. Okay, thanks, man. And he gave me a couple note cards of her work. And one had a black and white Strat on it, and one had a sunburst one, kind of like what yours is. So I got home a few days later, and she sent me an email, and I said, yes, I met your son. He was a very, very polite young man. And she said, well, I'm working on a book. I said, okay. She said, it's a book of musical instrument historical firsts. I said, okay, how can I help you? And she said, well, it's weird how things unfold. And she says, I was in my car, and I'm never in my car with the radio on that station at that time of day, but that day I was, and I heard you talking for 5 minutes. She goes, I was really intrigued. I said, okay, thanks. Tell me more about your book. And so she did, and she goes, I want to photograph your guitar, your Buffalo Trace guitar, the very first one you built, because it is a musical instrument historical first.
All bourbon barrel.
Yeah, all out of a bourbon barrel.
Right.
I said, wow, thank you. That's very flattering. I'm happy to help you out with that. So that turned into, that was in June, and we were trying to coordinate. She lives in Nashville. And so when would be a good time to come down? And she says, whatever other guitars you have that you've made, she goes, I'm happy to photograph them too. And she says, I would just like to use that in my book when it's finished. I said, well, that's wonderful. And so we're looking at scheduling, and we're going over stuff. And she said, that day won't work. I've got a doctor's appointment. And that day won't work. I've got another doctor's appointment. And I said, if you don't mind me asking, and I said, if it's none of my, it is none of my business. If you don't want to answer, say it's none of your business. I said, but what are you going through medically? She said, I'm a breast cancer survivor. I said, wow. And she goes, that day is a follow-up for this, and that day is a follow-up for a PET scan. I said, no, that's wonderful. I said, how far out are you? She says, I'm 10 years. I said, well, I've got a story around breast cancer and a guitar, and that's all I'm going to say. I'll share the story with you in person when we meet. She said, okay, that'd be great. So it worked out, 6-7 weeks later, it was mid-late August, went down and took 7 guitars. And so I showed them to her, and she was very sweet. She was very impressed. She was very complimentary, and just, spent a couple hours just taking pictures of them, interviewing me, put a video camera up. We talked about stuff, And when it came time to talk about this one right here, which is Susan, I said, here's why I wanted to bring this. And I told her, I said, this guitar, I said, my sister Susan, who was a year younger than me, year and a day, she died November 21st, 1999 of breast cancer with 3 kids under the age of 5. And so at that time, Susan had been gone 16 and a half years. That summer, when I was over actually in Kelvin Cooperage, no, I was in a warehouse in southern Indiana, going through and sorting heads and finding heads. I saw 2 heads with 3 pink stripes on them. All right, and it looks like it's faded pinkish, grayish purple, but it is actually pink. And so when I saw both of those, I thought, well, I know what I'm going to do with that. And so as I looked at it and tried to research stuff, why are those pink stripes there? Well, a bourbon barrel by law from 1964 can only be used for bourbon one time. It can be used for anything else for any number of years after that. So a lot of times they'll sell and turn the barrels back in and repurpose them, put brandy in them, whatever. It's likely that was then repurposed for brandy in some capacity. The barrel was disassembled, and here's the head. Okay. I have no idea to know how old those are. But I got both of them, and I knew at that point I was going to build a guitar as a tribute to my sister. 3 pink stripes, 3 girls. I've got 3 daughters, And so as I'm building that, I thought, how can I really make it more significant. And so because Susan was 36, I used 36, I think 6 or 7 millimeter size Swarovski crystals around the side of the body to run this way. And each crystal represents a year of her life, And then while I was building it, I found a pink rhinestone flask, so it's in there as well. But when I told her,
you actually haven't talked about the flask compartment thing yet.
No.
Just grab that guitar. We can show people.
All right. So on the back of them, now this is actually not a black back. This is another top. But I just decided, what can I make each of these further unique? Well, and the flask wasn't the first design. The first design was I was going to try to do mini bottles. And the Buffalo Trace one that's hanging in Frankfurt actually has a mini bottle in a compartment that I put down in here in the cutaway. Took a crazy amount of engineering, and when I realized not all mini bottles are the same size, do something different. Okay, go with flask. Not all flasks are the same size, but I got more room to work with. So I just settled on putting the flask in here, So they all have a flask. But when I told her the story, by the time I was finished, we both were crying, literally, And so as she's telling me about her book, she says, my goal is to have 80 chapters, 80 instruments. She goes, you're 47 or 48. Now, this was 3 years ago. I need to follow up with her. So why don't you stop at 50? Get 50 instruments, publish your first book, and then do your next, get 50 more. That way, your idea and your art and your vision is out in the world without having to wait. And she says, that's a good idea. I'm not quite sure. And then she said, I want someone to meet with you. Okay, who's that? She goes, George Groon. And I said, wow, okay. She says, George? I said, I know who George is.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, George and I have been friends for 10 years.
Wow.
And I said, okay, how'd that unfold? She said, I reached out to him as I started this idea of this project because people would bring me these instruments, and if they're guitars or stringed instruments, he's a historian. He's here in Nashville. He's been around 40-something years. He's like a world authority on so much stuff. And she goes, I needed his help to authenticate the stories I was being told. Some of these instruments he had seen years ago. She says, so he's been a really huge help in the authentication process of what I'm doing. And she goes, I like you. I think this is such a cool idea, and I think he'd be interested. So that turned into, so I said, okay, that'd be great. So she called him while I was there. And so I got down there Sunday. She talked to him Sunday night. When I got back there Monday morning, she says, okay, George says, come. She said, we'll be wrapped up by about 1 o'clock. She goes, he gets back from lunch about 1. He said, well, just go by and see him. He'll give you some time. Oh, okay, cool. So we finished up, thanked her for her kindness and her hospitality, and went by Groon's and walked in with 2 guitars, walked in with Susan, and I walked in with one I don't have with me. A buddy of mine owns a penny that's actually inlaid with pennies on the top in a polka dot pattern, like Randy Rhoads' Flying V was, because this guy loves Randy Rhoads' work and has a reproduction of the Serval V, the black with the white dots. Uh-huh. So anyway, I had those 2 guitars that I actually took in with me. And so George, he was real kind. We walked up to the second floor. His office is up there. He's got a bunch of snakes in there in his cages. And he says, can you help me do some clean out? Sure, George. So I helped him clean out some of the cages. Here, hold this. Okay. He goes, you want some of their sheds? Sure, I can use those, So after we spent some time there, and because he's a herpetologist, by training. So, and he's, and it was really cool that he shared, I've never seen that many snakes anywhere. I never want to,
Right.
They were not poisonous, but they're constrictors. And anyway, you like snakes or you don't. I'm door number 2. I can deal with them, but I'm not going to have a pet. But I respect the way God made them, and they're beautiful animals. So then we went out, and he showed me some of his special favorite guitars. And he took me up to the 3rd floor, and that's where I got to meet the guys that are doing the luthier work, the restoration. And he took me in another back room that had like 8 high, 4 wide, like 4 units of probably close to 300 guitars. They're mostly 50s, 60s, 70s, historical significance guitars. that are now part of a collection that I think is owned by either Belmont or Vanderbilt. I can never keep it straight which. Some of these instruments, well, they're all historically significant, and part of the program was they're made available to students to actually play on and check out like a library book.
That's amazing.
Which is because they're not just collecting dust, you know.
Yeah.
So he says, he's going through, and I put my finger on one. He says, "Get it down." So I opened it up. It was a 1960 Cherry Sunburst Les Paul Standard.
Yeah.
Price tag $250,000 right on it.
Yeah.
Picked it up, strummed it, not plugged in. So I've actually played one.
Do this thing.
No, man, it was like,
that's how I feel when I go in there, go into Carter.
man, it was like, okay, I've got a chance to play something that's older than I am. It was 2 years older than me. It was in great shape. And oh, by the way, the historical significance of it. It just was a neat thing.
Sure.
If I never have a chance to do that again, I've done it once. Lasted 10 seconds. It was good. It was really cool. But it was just like picking one of these up and strumming it, except this wasn't made in 1960 and it valued at $250,000. That's kind of how I look at guitars. They can't help who made them. They can't help what name's on their headstock. They can't help their construction. They're musical instruments.
What did he say about your design?
It was really cool. He strummed them. He goes, "Wow, these things are loud."
Yeah.
And he goes, "They're extremely resonant." I said, "That's right." He said, what's the sign of the best electric guitar? I said, "What's that, George?" He goes, "How loud they are unplugged." I said, "Okay." He says, "These are some of the loudest guitars I've ever heard in my life." I said, "Okay." And then I put myself out there, and it was like with Paul. Okay. If you ask someone a question, if you're going to ask, you better be person enough, I'll say man enough, or whatever, to accept the answer that comes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like when you pray for something, as a Christian, man, if you're asking God for something, can you handle how he answers you?
Yeah, sure.
He's going to answer you.
Right.
Same thing with the builds. All right. And so I said, "George, would you do anything differently on these?" I said, "With what I've explained to you, what I have to work with while I'm working." He said, "No." He goes, "I think your intonation's off on one of these." And it's this note right here, and it was. He
Just
said,
moving a saddle, though.
"That's an adjustment. That's not a design change."
Right.
I said, "George, thank you for your honesty and your candidacy and just giving me your time today." He says, "I think it's great." So, he didn't offer for me to sell them there. I didn't ask to sell them there. That was not the purpose of me going there. Was, here is a world-renowned historian of musical instruments who has expressed interest in seeing what I'm doing because a photographer who is his friend believed in me and what I'm doing enough to reach out to him to ask him for 2 hours of his time as a gift to me. That's so stinking cool, man.
No kidding.
So
it's cool how candid the interaction was and not,
Yeah. And so I'm very thankful, for that opportunity. I can't wait to see the book that comes out. So as I'm talking to Cheryl, the photographer, and the author, she's showing me some note cards. I said, "Oh yeah, your son gave me that one and that one." She goes, "Well, that black and white one is the first Stratocaster ever built." And she gave me the history on it. Well, what she's done is she's printed a little story on the back of each one. Okay. And then the Sunburst two-tone burst Strat was the very first two-tone. So and she's not a musician. Okay. It just was such a cool thing to be a part of and to be involved in, So I'm just excited about when I'm dead and gone, those truths don't change, in anything in this world and life. Only one person can do something for the first time. Okay. And so I thought about this on a spiritual, on a philosophical level, and I've shared this with you. What are the odds, okay, of any point in history of someone being alive for what period of time? Well, the odds are you count the years, how many people are born, and do the math. Okay. And then you start adding in other variables with period in history, living in that period in history, then being a guitar player or a musician, then being a guitar builder, and then living in an area where bourbon is made, and then in the right cultural time. Dude, I can't do the physics of the math what that number is. Bottom line is, and I allowed myself to just accept the reality of it is what it is. For some reason, God entrusted this to me, gave me the desire and the opportunity of my heart, gave me the intelligence, gave me the physical capacity, gave me the hands, the head, and the heart, and the mind, gave me access to being able to pay for a place to do it. Nothing in life is free. You can barter stuff, but everything takes money. Money's just a tool. And you either have enough to do what you want to do or you don't. Whether it's buying a house or, having business cards printed. It's all the same concept. And so that's how I look at, what I'm doing. That's how I look at what life is. Try to just keep a really good, focused, realistic filter on everything, okay? So then back, with the design build, all right, working with the limitations of what the parameters are that are self-imposed, I started thinking about, as I was even starting to build it, I looked up, there's nothing in the patent office. All right, what are the requirements? Fine. I kept handwritten records in a notebook that's cloth bound that you can't take pages in and out of, in ink, dated, signed by certain people at certain times, witnessing 120 pictures. I mean, it's all documented, sitting in a safe deposit box. Got the first one finished middle of June in 15, and spent a week at night navigating the website of the patent office and trademark office, back and forth over 4 years. It still isn't where I want it to be. I haven't been issued the patent because a patent lawyer who's not a musician doesn't seem to understand the concept that a internal compartment, a flash compartment on an electric guitar is not the same thing as the dreadnought body of an acoustic guitar. That's the point of stipulation at this point. So I've talked to my attorney, and he says, you took the hard road, you did it on your own, and you filed the kind that's hardest to prove. Okay, I want to get in the system, and fine. I wouldn't even say pilot error. I knew what I was doing, but I didn't really know what I was doing, but I still did what I did. Knowing that they're always going to want revisions, like a college professor. You never write your best term paper the first time. You leave stuff out. And then when they say change this, change that, then you put in what you were going to put in, but you knew they were going to knock you down because no one ever gets it right the first time. Okay. So what we need to do now is just file for a different type of patent, a design patent, not a utility patent. That's more of an aesthetic. Okay, fine. But the thing I find, for lack of a better word, it's not even comforting, but I know there's no one that can get in front of me in the patent office with my design.
These are PAF guitars.
They're PAF guitars. That's right. They're patent applied for. If someone comes up with my idea, they're going to get shot down just like I got shot down. So they've got to come up with an idea that's not my idea to do something that's what I'm doing that's not possible because they'd have to be different. So I'm fine to wait for that time and make this happen and be patient, and then eventually be awarded the patent for the intellectual property, which I'm going to believe is going to happen. That's just a really cool thing to me, So then with the design of these, I like the idea, again, of most of them, single volume control, pickup wide open, wraparound bridge, no tone control. When you plug in, what you're hearing is completely the sound of the instrument, the pickup, with nothing taken out, nothing reduced. The wraparound bridge offers you more sustain. The internal structure, these are semi-hollow, but they're framed like I-beams. There's a skeleton in them. There's complete glued physical contact from the front to the back. The bridge, I make a solid block that the studs are recessed into, again, for resonance and sustain. These things are loud. They're very loud guitars. I get them finished. I've got friends that are local players. I just put them in their hand and say, where are you guys out this week and next week? We got fine. Take it, play it. Let me know if I need to do anything differently. Tell me if you find a high spot, if I miss something. They bring them back, and it's like, man, you nailed it. That makes me feel really good. That's an understatement, okay? Because I'm a human being with hands. I'm not a computer cranking out a CNC thing that there'd be no excuse for anything to be wrong with. There's never anything wrong with these. That's not what I'm saying. It's just I'm satisfied with the level of what these are that I'm able to achieve with basic tools and two hands and a heart and a head putting time into it, you know. And these, I'm very proud to say that, you know, show me another guitar player who builds his own guitars of this quality, and that other people recognize the quality and will say, man, these necks feel like they're old friends and way broken in. All right.
They do.
That's quite a compliment to receive. It's also extremely intentional with effort going into it, you know, because I build them like I'm going to keep them. And like I said, I'm real picky. Once I know I get to that point where I'm satisfied with it, being realistic for what it is, then I'm very happy to put it in someone else's hands. I'm very able to let it go if someone has enough money to buy it and wants it, you know. And a really weird thing, and it didn't take me that long to wrap my head around, as a luthier, as an instrument builder, the whole goal of building an instrument is for it to be heard and played, okay? That's not my main goal. As crazy as that sounds, those words come out of my mouth, it still is weird because I play. My main goal is for these to be seen, purchased, and seen and appreciated. If they get played, that's awesome. People are going to love it. Some of the people that own my instruments are not guitar players. They bought them purely because they fell in love with what they saw, you know. And that's very gratifying as an artist of any type of medium. You know, I think life is a daily art project. You know, I love color, fascinated by color, fascinated by hues, fascinated by butterflies and birds, flowers, always have been. I've been collecting butterfly wings and butterflies off the fronts of cars for years, you know, just because at some point they're going to be part of the guitars that I build. And if I've got something I can look at and touch, it's still being appreciated, you know. That's just who I am as a person, as a builder, as a man.
So if somebody wants to get their hands on one of these guitars, how can they do that?
All you have to do is ask.
Yeah. How can they get in touch with you?
My website, bourbonbarrelguitar.com. There's a contact page, email. I got one phone. It's 859-509-7769. Had it for years. It's on my website. That's on my cards. You can text me. You can call me. You can send me an email, mike@bourbonbarrelguitar.com. I look at email once a day. Text is usually the quickest for me. If you want to play it, come out and play it. I got a showroom, you know, out in Athens. Any given time, whatever I've got in inventory or that's not out on the road being tested is there. You're welcome to come by. I got some different amps. You can bring your own. We work out the right thing. I'll bring it to you. You know, one of the things that when I had the vision to do this was when possible and I had someone buy it, I wanted to physically deliver it in person. So got the first opportunity to do that 2.5 years ago around Thanksgiving. Drove to New York City, and a gentleman he wanted a Woodford Reserve guitar for his dad's 60th birthday. So I drove it up to Manhattan and got to stay with my sister. He hadn't seen her in a while. It was great to connect with Jenny. Delivered it up there and realized New York City is way too big, man. Way too big, way too expensive to park and tolls and all that stuff. But it was a neat experience. And so what I decided to do was I was staying, right downtown in Manhattan, and it was I think it was a 6 or 7 miles, it was like 60 blocks up the island, Midtown, whatever, to where we met. So I got a ride up there, took the guitar. Guy loved it, he wanted. Initially, he said, we take a discount and a couple bottles of Pappy. I said, I'd love to, but I need the money more, And so anyway, we met, went in, and he loved it, had a drink. And then I thought, it was like 3 or 4 o'clock. This was in November. I'm going to walk all the way back down to where I was staying down by the stock exchange. And it was a long walk. And it was cold, but it was amazing because I got to, go through different ethnic neighborhoods, went by Grand Central Station, went into Grand Central Station, walked through, made some little detour and walked right in front of a Russian goods store. And I went in and, because I just met Tatiana like 5 weeks prior to that. And she had made a huge impact on my life already at that point. And I decided it was a month before Christmas. So I went in and picked up a couple Russian-made Christmas ornaments, some of the glass ones. One was a tree and one was a little bluebird. And so it was cool to be able to buy those for her in a Russian store, and then walked, some more down and found just some other really cool stores, and just to, look in windows and see the activity of just what was going on, the week before Thanksgiving in New York City. It just was an amazing experience. But man, by the time I got back, 5 or 6 hours later, because I was in my motorcycle boots, which they're not great for long distance walking. They're, pretty sturdy, but my feet were tired. My knees were hurting, but it was just a cool experience. So got to deliver that one. And then a year later, a friend of mine lives in Charleston. He and his wife are good friends of Tatiana's, and we'd visited them, and he loved what I'm doing. He's not a musician. And what's interesting is his birth date is the same in his initials, DSP, as the stamp for Woodford. I can't read what it is. It's DSP something 48 or 49, whatever. But anyway, the initials lined up with something related to what's...
Initials lined up.
Yeah. So it was just really cool, So anyway, he went down to... There's a German chain called Womfoss. They have stores in the U.S., and it's a small store. One side sells specialty boutique flavored olive oils, and the other side sells specialty boutique scotches and whiskeys from all over the world. All right. And so he went in and talked to them, and one of the owners, it's a husband and wife, they're really cool. He happens to be a guitar player. And so he looked at the website, and his wife reached out to me and said, very interested. So when we went down to visit, took some pictures and looked through them, and he wasn't there. So she says, I'm going to do this as a surprise for him. Okay, fine. So I was going to, as it worked out, my uncle had just passed away down in Knoxville, and within a couple of days of when I'd lined up the visit to go to Charleston to let him have his guitar that he didn't know he was getting. So I rented a car, put 6 or 7 guitars in, went down, buried my uncle, and, spent time with my dad, and then the next day drove to Charleston. Well, her husband had reached out to me through the website and was asking me questions, but didn't realize that his wife had reached out to me. And so I'm generically answering him, kind of putting him off.
Right.
And I'd offered to him, actually, I've got to make a trip in the next few days. I'm happy to load up what I have, and you can, take a look. Well, then within 24 hours, he sent me a note back. He goes, okay, my wife came clean. I know which one I want. Fortunately, I had it with me because the guitar he chose was a Buffalo Trace one that I had done a special bottle-shaped head stock of the actual Buffalo Trace bottle, which has a little wider bulged-out piece at the base of it. Well, that guitar, a friend of mine, Paul Turley, who owns Penny, the one I was talking about, was with me at NAMM in 16. He goes, man, he says, every overnight sensation takes 10 years. He goes, I believe in you. He goes, I'm going to help you however I can and help you promote. He called Guitar World and lined up, and at that time they had a section, it was the very last page of each monthly issue, It Might Get Weird, not Wired, okay? Well, he goes, send me pictures of a guitar. So I sent him the picture of the Buffalo Trace one. Well, it ended up in the August issue of 2016 with Prince on the cover. Now, it came out in June because you know how they put stuff out.
Right.
Prince had just died. The very last page of that magazine.
Whole page. Yeah, that's great.
Then there's the guitar. So it was really, and I still have a couple of those copies of that magazine left. It was so cool to be able to meet the guy at his place of business with his wife and say, here's the one you chose. I says, I brought the rest. She goes, I know the one I want. Gave it to him, showed him the magazine, and we're still friends. He actually had me and Tatiana come down to Charleston 3-4 weeks ago. for a promotional event at Von Foss, and we're going to go back sometime in the fall. So she and I played for on and off for 2 hours, just acoustic stuff, right in the little foyer of people coming in off of King Street in Charleston.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really neat. So the one going to California, Miss Jennifer, it remains to be seen if I'm going to fly out. I'd like to take the time to drive out. Honestly, don't think I'm going to have the time to do it.
Have you ever made that trip?
I've not driven it.
I think everyone that grows up in this country should do that at some point in their life.
It's going to happen.
It's amazing.
It's going to happen.
I did it in 2010.
And I've flown to the Southwest and rented motorcycles and ridden around some, and I know I love that. One of these summers, maybe next or the following, I want to take a month and just ride out west. But anyway, so it's important to me if I can deliver in person, and then people that have bought them, locally close, obviously, come on over, man. Here it is. I'll bring it to you. That type thing. But just the personal aspect of, these are not just commodities.
Right.
Okay, these are pieces of art that happen to be amazing guitars. They're pieces of me as a person, as an artist, as a creator. They're bonding tools. For me, it's relationship first with anybody, and then the guitars are second. Just like at my shop, people come and hang out, and it's about relationship first. Yeah, I've got to get stuff done. I've learned how to multitask and deal with varying personalities, but it's all part of it. I'm thankful that people care and that they want to be around what I'm doing. I'm just a very blessed person. I'm the most blessed man I know. The other thing with George, and it actually adds further truth, for the first 2 years, and I haven't done it as much lately, but I still do it some, year round, I'd keep 1 or 2 guitars in my truck, hot or cold, to intentionally subject them to environmental extreme. Okay, people, the rule of thumb, is it safe for me to keep my guitar? The rule of thumb is where you're comfortable, your guitar's fine. Where you're uncomfortable, your guitar's not fine. Acoustic, electric, whatever it is, And so by keeping them in the cabin of the truck in the summertime, it gets 120, 130 degrees. Well, you open up the case and you can feel the heat coming off of it and out of it. I'll tell you what, man, it smells incredible because that wood heats up and the bourbon that's still in that is just, it's released. In the wintertime, they're real cold. You touch them and it's like your finger sticks to it, like Christmas Story. You lick the bridge and now you're hosed, man. You got to get some bourbon to melt that ice. In the summertime, I'll even sometimes just at the back of my shop, just lay them out directly in the sun on the concrete. They're absorbing heat ridiculously that way. And I'm doing it, again, to stress the necks. They're fine. They need adjusted less than any production instrument I've ever seen hanging on a wall in any store. And I've spent a lot of time in places like that working on stuff,
Is that because this wood has already spent its lifetime adapting to that?
I really do. I really do think that plays a part in it. I'm not a physicist, but when you think about it, this wood would be the reform school kid wood.
Yeah.
They've had a hard life. They just can't land on their feet, and they're pushed and stuck there because there's nowhere else to put them. Okay. And I say that's a sad situation to me and from a social standpoint. But this type of wood, this isn't treated properly. It's abused as wood intentionally, environmentally, and with liquid, no less.
Right.
So it's pretty temperamental at times, which is, again, why is it overkill? No. It's trying to make these things as stable as they can be when they're nothing about them. When you look at other ones, it's not an apples to apples comparison of, this is going to be stable because, this is going to be unstable because, but it's by design. And so I like a challenge, and I've met this challenge. I continue to meet this challenge. I learn with each one of them. The density in these pieces of wood varies, even though it's all the same genus and species. I've figured out how to make them continue to keep them stable, but take some of the weight out, and it's design. It's just pretty cool stuff. Each one gets better. Each one I learn something new on, and I love each one of them as if they were my own kids. And I've had a few situations I've been presented with that have confirmed that. Whether I wanted it to be confirmed or not, I already knew it, but I really know it now, you know.
So you don't at this point, you don't have a day job per se. This is your job. You're a full-time guitar builder and luthier.
I am. And I do guitar repair, you know, as well as in my shop. So that is making day-to-day possible because of the time these take to build. As one set of hands, I might be doing a pickup installation for you. Well, if I'm doing that, I can't take that time and do something on that. So I balance each day with what are the requirements of the day. Obviously, if you come to me, you need something done. You need your guitar back tonight or tomorrow or next week. These aren't even guitars yet. There's no deadline on these, okay? So I've got a good head about prioritizing my time and my energy and my efforts. I want to make you happy as my customer. Eventually, I'll make you happy as my buyer if we get to that point. Whether it's you or someone I haven't met, I'm not going to meet for 3 years, you know. But what I'm very thankful to be able to say is 7 days a week. My life is very flexible. I got an amazing boss. Dude's really cool. I can make as much noise as I want. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what time I show up because he knows if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. But I also have the luxury of every day that I get out of bed before I go to sleep, I've either worked on a guitar I'm building, I've worked on a guitar for somebody I know, somebody I don't know. My work on it is making it better for them. I'm able to listen to music whenever I want, whatever style I want, in my truck, in my shop, in my house. I'm able to play music, whatever I want, with whoever I want, whatever that looks like. I'm able to go hear music of either major artists at some arena or, you know, a small thing like we went to Red Barn last night, you know, and it's the same though because it's people playing music and it's going to hear it and taking it in. What a combination, man! You know, I mean, 7 days a week, everything I do, I enjoy. Oh yeah, there's some money attached to it. It's fine. That's in God's hands. I do my part each day. I show up, and I've got amazing support. My family is behind me 100%. I got great parents. Both of them are still alive. Both of them support what I do. My brother is awesome. He's 3 years younger. It's just there's no negative in my life at this point. It took a while to get here, you know, but meeting Tatiana has really helped just who she is as a person and how she lives her life and the values she has. She's an amazing example of grace and generosity and kindness and love, period. There's no stipulation, there's no but, there's no if. That is who she is. And that is the gift that is to me, and everyone who knows her is incredible, you know. And then combine that with she's also an artist and a musician and a singer. But from day one, she just absolutely has been enthralled by what this is. And what's really cool and how the universe unfolds, how God plays chess, you know, whatever. Right when I met her it was like the day after the Altec video was released. And so I remember I met her at 2 years, 29 weeks, and 3 days ago at Common Grounds Coffee House, you know, here in Lexington. And I met her I went to see somebody who didn't show up to play. She was there. We both had a mutual friend. We talked, we introduced, and she had a baby Taylor that needed some love. I have my 12-string in my truck. So I said, here's what I do. Here's who I am. I'd like to work on your guitar for you. And she was a little reluctant at first, but okay, fine. There's no pressure. Well, then she said, yeah, sure. It's all good. And so I said, well, she lives close to there. So I said, would you please take my 12-string, my Seagull, as collateral? She goes, well, I don't need it. I said, well, you just met me. That guy will vouch for me, but this is just insurance, you know. She goes, well, okay. So I walked her up to her apartment. She took it aside, walked her back, and I said, I'll call you later when I get your guitar ready. So about an hour and a half later, I sent her some texts and some pictures. She was still there with some of her friends, and that turned into some dialogue for the next few hours that night of, she played a couple songs, sent them to me. She played one on my 12-string, sent it to me. I now had a recording of her singing and playing that I listened to a lot that night and the next morning, and knew that, okay, here's a pretty woman who seems like a really cool lady. And I heard her play and sing. It's like, okay, my interest is piqued, And we met the next morning, had breakfast at Common Grounds, and went for a walk up to Ashland Park and talked for 3 hours, And it was a great conversation, and just, nothing more than any interest in friendship. Okay, I respect that. You got to be friends with somebody before anything else can happen. But another piece was cool was with the Alltech video. I told her, I said, I'm just going to share something with you. I'm going to ask you to take 8 minutes and go watch this. I said, it just was released literally a couple of days ago. This will tell you a little bit more and show you a little bit more about who I am as a person. And she says, okay, I'll watch it. And she did. And it was just such a neat thing to be able, if Alltech hadn't done that, if Michelle hadn't done such a great job, I couldn't have been able to say that, It still is an amazing piece of work. It's almost 8 minutes long that someone can sit and watch and go, phew. Well, then all the music in it is, then we took another day, and she says, okay, just start playing stuff. Change sounds, play songs. So all the music in it is me playing a Bourbon Barrel guitar through my amplifier with different sounds and stuff, So, and she brings it in and out. It's real subtle. It's amazing how well this thing is done. And so, again, when I look at that from an artistic standpoint, wow, this is just, I wish there was more than the words thank you
Sure.
that existed in English. And I've told that to Michelle. But even with the Lyons family, with the support from Alltech, with, I got a buddy that works there he opened the door, Dart Likens. And what's so cool about Dart, he's like you, he's a really nice person. He's real humble, he's real quiet. And he walked into Guitar Center one day carrying an acoustic guitar bridge. That's all he had. He goes, I got a question. I said, what's that? He goes, well, I rescued a guitar out of the trash, and the bridge was not on it. And how do I reattach it? What do I do? I said, well, we looked at it, had a little bit of a curve. I said, you have access to a sander belt? Yeah, I can belt sand. Okay. Smooth it out. See how that fits on what your top is, what do you got to start with. Or don't. If you've got pieces that are missing from the body that are on the bottom of this, leave them, because that creates your interface of your structure with your glue and the fibers for mechanical stability. So I said, I gave him my card, and I said, if you have any questions, just, come into Guitar Center. I'll come to you. I said, I'm happy to help you however I can. It's just cool you rescued a guitar out of the trash. Dude, we're wired the same, and I just met you, And so, and I take in homeless guitars. You know that as well. And guitars in need and rehab and all that. Some of them have a hard life. But anyway, so he looked at my card, and he goes, wow, that's cool. He said, he saw the pictures on the back. He goes, so you build guitars out of bourbon barrels? I said, yeah. He said, I work for Alltech. And he goes, would you like me to see if I can get you some barrels and heads? I said, by all means. Well, he says, give me a couple of weeks. Well, the next week was the summer NAMM, and I got a call from him when I was driving down there. He says, go by and see this guy next week. He's got some barrels for you when you get back. And that's how the relationship with Alltech began, It's just so cool how just things unfold.
So something else you've talked to me about is you have a cool house that you haven't told anybody about.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned you have this vision for a kind of experience someone could maybe have if they wanted to come here and purchase a guitar from you.
Yeah. Last year, we were able to buy a really cool home that was built in 1790, which is 2 years before Kentucky officially became the Commonwealth as a legitimate entity in 1792. In 1980, it was purchased and completely renovated. And so anyway, it became available last year, and my family was very supportive and encouraging about, let's make this happen. We did this. And so we have that. And it's a beautiful old was built as an inn originally. So it's all solid brick. It's built like a tank. It's got a huge kitchen on the back of it that's, I don't know, 24 by 24. So it's got a Cracker Barrel sized fireplace in it with the arm that swings to put the pot on. But it's right at the main intersection at Athens. You have to stop at the stop sign while you're there right in front of it. And so I'm able to have a showroom in the house because the Lexington zoning at some point made it B1, so it's commercial and residential. So it's like, wow, this is cool. So you walk in one of the two front rooms, it's like 19 by 20, 20 by 20. Each of the 4 rooms on the original structure, 2 up, 2 down, have a working fireplace, you know. So I decided to make one of the front rooms on the west side a showroom for the Bourbon Barrel guitars. And so it's pretty cool. It's constantly evolving because, you know, there's different amplifiers that kind of come and go and want to be babysat. And but any guitars that I have available are there. You know, people can come see them, come play them. When I moved in, the old elementary school was a couple blocks down, and it's not a school per se anymore. It's been a indoor flea market, antique mall, whatever, for 12 years, and it's up for sale right now. But anyway, I went over there the month after I moved in, and I found a really neat, oversized, jumbo, I don't know what the liter size is, of an old Granddad bottle in a frame that looks like an oil derrick. And it swings, so it actually rotates. And it's an old Granddad bottle, and the frame has an old Granddad plaque on it. And I thought, so I set it on top of a barrel that I've got sitting in the showroom. I thought, well, that looks really cool. It kind of looks like a drilling rig for bourbon. And then I got the idea of, okay, let's fill it up. But let's fill it up a special way, not just buy old Granddad and put it in. So then as I thought about it, I made the decision with whatever bourbon I have that's in there, when someone comes to my home, whether it's a friend, a customer, a client, a player, whatever, part of the welcoming them into my home and my showroom and who I am as a person and the experience of it is for them to pour a shot into my friendship bottle. Okay? If I can work it out where I talk to them and say, hey, you have a favorite bourbon? Yeah. Bring a bottle with you. Okay. Or I don't have it. Not a problem. And I don't always tell them why. Well, it's like, well, I'm going to be driving. I said, I didn't say we're going to drink it. I just said, bring it with you, you know? So then sometimes that piques their curiosity. But it's been really cool. So then they come and they either pour what they bring or they choose something I have. And then they make their pour. And then I've got a book. It's a journal, a bourbon tasting journal that I picked up at Alltech. You know, nice leather cover, and you write your stuff in it. So I have them sign the book, date it, and what their pour is, you know. And then people say, well, have you drunk it? Well, hell yeah, man. You want to have a shot right now, you know? But it's been a really neat thing because then people come in and from a emotional, social, psychological, humanitarian type friendship standpoint, that they even feel more welcome. You know, it's a negative word. It's not disarming somebody, but there's no other way to say. In a sales type process, the last thing someone wants to feel is pressured or being sold. Okay, and one of the things when I worked as a repair guy at Guitar Center was people would come in and they'd need help and picking out a guitar. And so what I would ask them, I'd ask them a multi-part question, and I'd say, but before you answer me, I'm the repair guy. I don't get paid money on how you answer me and what you buy. I'm not going to try to sell you something you don't want. You know, what's your budget? What are you looking for? And the nice thing about that is it always made things a whole lot more easy for the customers. And they would get what they wanted, or they get something within the price range of what they wanted. And that's very satisfying and very gratifying for me. You do the right thing first, the money will take care of itself, you know? So even with my instruments that are expensive and they're rising in price, they're going to be more expensive because I'm going to be building fewer and fewer of them intentionally because these are one-of-a-kind pieces. And there's going to be special special one-of-a-kind ones, coming out in the next 4 or 5 years, that they're already here. It's just a matter of building them. But I want people to feel welcome. I want people to not want to leave, And so as part of the experience, I've got a spare bedroom suite upstairs. It's furnished with the antique mahogany bedroom suite that belonged to my aunt back in the 40s when she was a child. It's beautiful. Canopy bed, the high boy, the vanity that goes with it. And there's a really nice bathroom, showers, whirlpool tub, that's built in with the whole thing. But I can have guests. So if someone, wants to come into Lexington, they want to buy a guitar, they need a place to stay, I can put them up. If they want to accept that, fine. If they don't, I'm not offended. It's just something I can offer. Someone comes over and we sit down, and 3 hours later, we're a little farther through that bottle than it's safe for them to drive, and it's nighttime. Guess what? I got a really cool couch in the showroom, but I got a bed upstairs if they need it, and I'm not making light of any of that. But the whole point is the guitars are part of what the experience is, okay? If someone has a few days, they want to come to town and, they want a tour guide. I've been to most of the distilleries around here. I know some of the people at some of them. If we get to meet someone I know, great. If not, I can still show you a good time. I know the area. I've lived here since '91. I love the bluegrass. The western edge of the Appalachians is incredible. Just topographically, climatically, it's never crazy extreme. I just really feel fortunate to be where I am doing what I'm doing.
That approach speaks to me as someone. As a customer, when someone treats me that way, because I'm from a small town in eastern Kentucky of 2,000 people in the county seat, and you don't do business with anybody. I mean, I don't care if it's the McDonald's drive-thru. You don't do business with anybody that's not personal.
Right.
And that's the way that I was raised, just Southern hospitality, right?
Yep.
And sometimes I see, like, on Twitter or different social media platforms, like, people will go to a car dealership and buy a car, and they put a picture up, and it's like, welcome to the Auto Plaza family. Is that really what's happening there, or do you sit there for a couple hours and walk out with a car?
Yeah.
If you ran into your car salesman on the street a year from now, would that person know who you are? Do you have a relationship, a personal relationship with your car because of who it came from? You don't. And as a guitar player, as a musician, you may develop a personal relationship with an instrument because of what you go through with it, and what you make with it.
Yep.
But I really, really, really like what you're trying to offer with that experience, because it's someone purchases a product from you, and then they make what they make with it, and it travels with them like any guitar would. But they also know it's got your blood in it. And they know what it took for you to build it, and they know your story, and they've been to your house. And there really is an authentic relationship there. And you're not just selling somebody a product. They're purchasing a product, but they're also purchasing a relationship with you that'll go forward.
Yeah.
And just so people know, these staves that the guitar hanger staves, these guitars are hanging on, you made these for me too, and they're awesome.
I made the hangers.
Yeah, the hangers out of staves. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it was fun, man. It was fun. I love the idea of it. Yeah.
So again, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, if they need guitar work done, or they want to play a Bourbon Barrel guitar, maybe purchase one down the road, or if they're ready to buy one, or they want a custom build, how can they do that?
Real simple. Website, bourbonbarrelguitar.com. There's a contact page on it. Find it right at the top. My phone number, 859-509-7769. It's on the website. Email, contact Mike at Bourbon Barrel Guitar. There's an info at, it comes right to me. I'm an easy guy to find. I try very diligently to be available to return phone calls if I miss them within a day. I have machinery going. I can't hear a telephone, and also one of the things that's important to me is to live a balanced life. So I'm not opposed to working 80 hours a week if that's what I have to do. I'm also not opposed to working 10. And like yesterday, I had planned on being in my shop, in and out most of the day. I wasn't. I had yard work I had to do, rain's coming here, stuff I'm working on, and just living life as a, yes, I have a company. I am the company. I'm the bookkeeper. I'm the dude that goes and does this. I'm the guy that cuts and builds this. I'm the guy that blah, blah, blah. Okay. So if I don't do it, it doesn't get done. And again, that kind of goes back to when I was in medical sales for 20 years as whether an employer or an independent contractor. I didn't sit behind a desk, working in surgery, delivering stuff. A ton of responsibility comes with that. A lot like what you do, but it came down to if I didn't do what needed to be done, there was no one else to pick up my slack and do it for me. Okay, fine. That was always the nature of the business. That's how I'm wired. But that still takes a person with a special set of qualities and motivation and discipline to be able to execute it, And you shared something with me that touched my heart in a very huge way. And initially, if you just look at how it's written on paper, it might not come out that way, and it might not come out as a compliment, and it might not come out as it was intended. But I remember when I first met, and I'm kind of back and forth, but when I first met you, I think you working might have been for a phone company, and you brought your guitar in, and you had a dress pants, and I'm not sure if you had a tie on, but I remember.
I'm sure I had a whole.
I remember talking to you and thinking, "This is a cool dude," and I like this guitar. And we did talk for probably at least an hour. I do remember that as well, and I think it was a little bit of nut work. Maybe just slotting one out. The string was too high, or getting pinched, or something. But so here we are, 3 years later, and a couple months ago, you said to me, and this was very impressive to me. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, the fact that you're still doing this is impressive to me because you could have easily quit. And when I look at, and you are right, I could have easily quit when you look at a lot of external circumstances, but that's not who I am. I cannot not do this, and when I look at the amount of awareness that there is and what has come to fruition and what has been achieved around the 25 or 26 instruments that I've built as Bourbon Barrel guitars, how I've done it, how I've had to do it, the schedule that I've had to work around, it's really only been on a part-time basis. And so now that I'm full-time devoted to my own repairs and my own builds and, helping people out, to where I am my own thing, my own boss, it's going to be really interesting, good, in a positive way to see how this grows and what comes from it. And it's also helping me further define and refine and define again what the growth of what this all is, And I've had a bunch of people offer their opinions. Some of them have been solicited. Some of them have not been. Some of them are great ideas, and some of them, as great of an idea as it may be, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And it's not for what I'm doing. It doesn't line up with my heart and my vision of what this is. And it's not one, but the moving forward direction still seems each day to unfold in a consistent way with what my initial thinking and vision of what these were going to be was and still is they're not mass produced. They're limited production. They're going to be even more limited production because of what they are and why I'm doing this, And then you look at what the bourbon industry is turning into and what's happening. There's all these crazy priced single barrel so-and-so that 3 years ago no one ever knew existed.
People appreciate it as a craft.
People appreciate it as a craft. That's right. And as well as I do, human nature, you see something, you want it. And once you see something and you want it, you generally never stop wanting it. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. Mm-hmm. But my own experience is anything I've ever wanted, I still want if I don't have it. That's not a bad thing. That's just the way God made people. And I think that's pretty cool because want and need and desire in the right ways and right motivations serve very good ways in human development, in social development and how we live our lives each day and what we do. But yeah, I've got some things that I'm just real excited about in the next year to 2 years that are going to be produced and appreciated and purchased.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Cool. Well, thanks very, very, very much for sitting down and having this conversation.
Thank you, brother.
And, I admire you and your vision and stick-to-itiveness and just everything about what you've articulated here.
Thank you.
So if you want to check out a Bourbon Barrel guitar, give Mike a call.
Happy to help you.
All right.
I'll have a drink with you, too, if you want.